Everyone, so welcome to part 2 of our copyright review videos. So the first one dealt with very broad ideas of sort of just existing in a world where intellectual property is the thing, and the librarian went over a lot of just very general rules for citation, no matter what department you're in. This time we need to look at some things that are very specific to us, both in our class and just as digital artists in general. So the first thing I want to go over is actually how copyright differs for us, here we go, in the art field, and what some of that has meant. So first of all, as soon as you make something, copyright attaches. So there's no paperwork you have to fill out, there's nothing that you have to do other than it existing. If you would like to make it provable in court, that's another issue. So dating stuff, making notes, one surefire way is to actually mail yourself something. Make sure they postmark it at the post office, and then you don't open it until you go to court, because a federal postmark is legally admissible as like an official date. But so copyright is meant to protect you, the artist, and you should take it very seriously. You should make sure that you are protected. And one of the things I like to show is it's a little bit hard to read on here, but this is an actual contract that I signed, and that the person who hired me signed. They hired me to do a bit of animation for them. And one of the things that they are purchasing from me is the rights to it. So they're not just paying me for work, they're paying me for the right to use my work, which is why you have language like this that says they have all rights of any kind throughout the world in perpetuity, so forever, because it's part of a larger film, in any and all languages, so they can release it anywhere in the world, and they're also allowed to change it anyway. They can adapt, change, revise, delete, from, add to. So they can rearrange what I gave them, whatever they want. I'm not only giving up the right to make money off of this, I'm giving up the right to have any control over it. And this seems extreme, but it makes sense because it's someone else's movie. So I was working under their direction anyways. And so they just have the right to bring in someone else and have them change it however they like. But that's one of the things I was getting paid for. So not only are you wanting credit, which would have been somewhere else in this contract that I would get credit for my work, but you want to make sure that people are paying you for the things they should be paying you for. All right. So the flip side of this is that as artists, we make things, and eventually they're supposed to enter public domain. What is public domain? Well, public domain is the notion that something was made long enough ago, in this case 1819. Jane Austen is long dead, and so yes, her work should have been protected while she was alive because she should make money off of her work. But at this point, it now enters the public domain, which means we have intellectual property for the whole public to use and reuse, which in the case of Pride and Prejudice has just been all over the place. And there's a reason you see multiple versions of fairy tales, right? There's a reason you see multiple versions of, old children's books, because they exist in the public domain and no one has to pay anyone for them. Now, not everything that works like that is like that. We've all seen there's lots and lots of Lord of the Rings things. This is not in public domain. It's just so popular that it makes sense that people continuously, this is from the 70s, there was an animated version of it. It's so popular that people want to license it. But for the most part, things that exist in public domain are the ones you keep seeing brought up over and over again because they're so much easier, there's less risk, and no one else has any control over it. Now, I want to talk about why it is so difficult to understand if something is within copyright or public domain, because it is very, very difficult. There's no clear-cut answer. And this timeline is why. So way back, Jane Austen wrote her Pride and Prejudice around here, so a little bit before that. Copyright term in the United States, it's different in every country, that's another problem. Copyright in the United States lasted about 15 years automatically. And you can see that there used to be something called an optional extension. So what was happening is that, excuse me, if something was worth staying under copyright for you, you were expected to file paperwork, and it wasn't that much, but like for each piece of intellectual property, for each book you wrote, um, in order to get it extended by another 15 years, the notion was that, well, it should be worth your time. Because if it's not worth your time to fill out two pieces of paper and sign them and send them to the Copyright Office, then it should be out there, right? In the public domain. And you can see a couple of times with over a century, they changed it. So they extended the initial copyright, probably, that was after about 30 years of the other one. And this makes sense because people kind of live longer, and intellectual property and the printed word and things became much more common. And so having an initial thing of 30 years plus 15, that makes sense. And then it wasn't until about 70 years later that the initial term stayed the same, but they extended the optional extension to be almost another 30 years. So you had almost 60 years of copyright, which, if you're an adult who makes a thing, is most of your lifetime. And so that worked out well for a while. And then 1976 happened. Well, what happened in 1976? In 1976, this guy was about to enter public domain. Somewhere a little bit after that, Steamboat Mickey would have been Steamboat Willie, excuse me, would have been no longer under copyright. Now, it means that this version would still be under copyright, but the old one wouldn't be. And Disney is no fan of people using their artwork and their intellectual property in any way. They're very, very controlling, especially back in the 70s. And so they fought a lot. They threw a lot of money at this. And you can see the result is that now the initial copyright is 80 years. So for a company, it's sort of 80 years from inception. For an individual person, it's 80 years after their death. And then in 1998, that was extended again. I don't know if it's exactly 100 years. So what that means is that within, so things before 1976, there was a certain amount of things that were supposed to enter public domain, and then spontaneously, 50 years of material did not. Which means the cutoff, I think, is 1923. And so anything made before that did enter public domain, and then, like, depending on if it was audio or visual or in public domain in the first place and all these kinds of crazy things, was the difference between whether something was in public domain or not. It wasn't just a clear-cut year. And so these changes, especially these rapid ones and within my lifetime, those are what has caused such confusion. And so just keeping that in mind, this is why we the question is never simple. This is why the question is never a matter of, oh yeah, it's in public domain. In fact, if you were to look up, anything on fair use, you're going to get like lots and lots and lots of pages on just like the extension, Clipart, copyright. The dates are crazy right now. So figuring it out, you have to look for very explicit information. And so that's what I want to talk about with you guys that's specific to us. If we go to quick links and we go to the library, and let's see, research guides, we're DAT, and there's only one DAT. There we go. Okay. So figuring out if something's in public domain means that we really want to know. We want to know for a fact that something's in public domain, and we're going to talk about how to look at a website and kind of figure that out. But you want it to be pretty explicit. Another thing we're going to look at is Creative Commons, which is a very specific set of licenses that are good for us. But first I want to talk about fair use, which is fairly, no pun intended, amorphous. It's not a concrete idea, and it's one where enforcement will matter a lot. So fair use is the notion that what you're reusing something in a way that does not require any sort of previous rights being purchased. Of course that happens. So in a couple years ago, there was a Peanuts movie from Blue Sky, right? And in order to do this, they had to license the work from the Charles Schulz family, and the family actually worked with them very closely, and they don't have any rights beyond the one movie. They didn't have any rights for like Christmas special, which is very, very common, and it was a very, very specific set of rights. Fair use applies to things that are still copyrighted, so not public domain things, are still copyrighted, but are somehow you still don't need to ask permission. So in the case of the Peanuts, it would be a movie review about the Peanuts. So of course, all over the web, there would be all sorts of movie reviews, including in the form of videos. Video movie reviews are very, very common. And so, how are they allowed to do this? Well, if you were to go to any movie review site and watch any of the reviews, one thing you'll notice is that they spend a lot of time um, with their own faces on here. So if we look at this one, I'm going to turn the sound off and just kind of scroll through it. It's a lot of them talking. So it's not 3 minutes of the movie. It's a lot of these guys talking, and then you see there's still artwork. They're not even using clips from the trailers. Or maybe they did a little bit there. But you can see that so much of this is just them talking about the movie. That's one way people will have it be fair use, because it's limited amount of time and material. Same thing. Let's see. Oh, these are honest trailers. We want movie reviews. Here we go. So if you have a movie review and you do want to use video clips, besides only using them from the trailers and not, say bootlegs or anything. Oh, it's still, here we go. Again, they're using still artwork actually. The honest trailers do use movie clips, but here's the thing, they only use them for stuff that's released. So they couldn't do a Transformers honest trailer until the Blu-ray is out. So they purchase the Blu-ray, and then what they do is they chop up the movie into small bits. So what happens is when you chop it up into small bits, you are protecting the commercial value of the work. So in other words, people cannot watch an honest trailer, people cannot watch a How It Should Have Ended and actually experience the movie. Which is why How It Should Have Ended isn't video clips from the movie, it's animation. So, and like, it's clearly caricaturized animation. Because you have to be careful. You have to, here we go. So you can see some of the artwork. Clearly this is caricatures of what these characters look like. And so that's another way you can protect yourself, because it's not, watching this does not replace watching Civil War at all. It does not replace the experience, and therefore you're protecting the commercial value of the work. In all of these cases, it's a critique. So you were allowed to critique work or satirize it. Actually, How It Should Have Ended kind of strikes a balance between those two. But you were allowed to do that. The other thing you could do is education. So that covers both you guys in class, but also, let's say I wanted to do a video on criticisms of The Last Jedi and why some things work and why some things don't. And I can totally do that. I can take clips from the Blu-ray and remix them and talk constructively about why this part works and this part doesn't. So, and you need to, kind of be falling under all of these things. Note that protect commercial value of the work does not mean you're not making money off of it, okay? Screen Junkies, How It Should Have Ended, all these things, they make money off of their commercials. What it means is that you're not taking away from the revenue of the original work. So Screen Junkies making an honest trailer for the last night, whatever it's called, that does not take away from the money Universal or Paramount, whoever, was going to make off of this movie. So that's what protects commercial value of the work means. Technically speaking, legally, because you guys are all in education, you fall under fair use. So technically, as long as you're just making stuff for class, you're not going to get any legal trouble for using copyrighted materials. However, for our purposes in my class and any DAT class, we want people to be making their own things, and so we have a somewhat higher standard, because in part we want you to be able to take your work that you make and bring it somewhere else. So with that in mind, we need to go over Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a set of licenses built on the notion of sharing and existing in a world where everything is so easily takeable. I mean, even these YouTube videos, I can totally just have a plugin and grab them. so there's a lot of sharing and resharing kind of by default, and so these licenses, rather than quote all rights reserved, they deal with this world. I have to find the actual licenses page about the licenses. There we go. So the licenses themselves. Now, there are they say here there's 3 layers. So legal code is like the actual legal definitions, which we're not going to go over. Human readable means like making it so that you and I can understand it. And then machine readable, I think, has to do with algorithms and getting people to recognize them. So the licenses, as described by them in human terms, you can view legal code if you want, but we're going to blow this way up. First up, we have attribution. With one exception, every single one of these Creative Commons licenses involves attribution, which is another way of saying citation, or citing your work, citing where things come from. We want to know who made it originally. That includes, by the way, if it's you. But almost all these licenses have that. I'm going to come back to share alike in a second. Non-commercial, which is just kind of tacked on to attribution, means you can use it, but not for commercial purposes. So you can use it for your demo reel, but not for this commercial, or like, I don't know, online ad or something you're going to make for someone else. You can use the person's artwork, but not for a poster that is going towards making money for someone. So again, because you guys are in education, even if it says non-commercial, you can use it, and it's okay. No derivs means you can use it as long as it's unchanged. So you can use what they said, but you can't make any edits to it. Share alike is the pay it forward license. So you can use this depending on the other attributes, but afterwards you have to send it forward on the same license. So in other words, if it's attribution share alike, then whatever you make using their music, let's say, you have to release as attribution share alike. Now, here's one that says attribution non-commercial share alike. So whatever you make from theirs, you can't release commercially, but also you have to release it under an attribution non-commercial share alike license. And frankly, the one that doesn't say no commercial, that means you're not only releasing your stuff, you're releasing your stuff for other people to make money off of. So you can see how these stack. Non-commercial no derivs mean it's released to you as long as you don't make money off of it and don't make changes to it. So that would be kind of the most restrictive one. There is one last one, and I don't see it here. There's one called Creative Commons 0, which is public domain. Yeah, I don't see it listed here. But basically, it's automatically sending something into public domain immediately. And we're going to see examples of that in just a minute. So let's see this in action. If you want to see some of these links, actually, you can go to support material in our page. And there's a lot of these links that we're going over. Openclipart.org. That's not how you spell that. So Openclipart is a place where, I guess they're kind of a redo. Let's go to these mandalas here. So everything on this site, if you click on license at the bottom, it says unlimited commercial use. All of these are released in the public domain, and then they specifically legally say Creative Commons 0 public domain license, which you can always click on those links and they can send you to here. So what that means is whoever released it is specifically very directly saying this is in the public domain, which is exactly the kind of information you are looking for. If you click on a site about its licenses and it says something like, well, we think they're public domain, but we're not sure and we don't want to, take responsibility for it, don't use that site. You want a site that is this clear, that says very explicitly, we use Creative Commons 0 every time an artist uploads a piece. That's what you're looking for, because it's very, very clear. And in the case of Openclipart, you can download PNG files because these are all vector files. Don't click the download button. You'll get, I don't know what you'll get. But you can do various sizes of PNGs or a PDF. And there's tons of stuff you can search for. So Arrow. And so this site is really good for graphics. So we've got there we go, and people made an entire series, and again, it's all downloadable as PNGs. Just so you guys know, if you click on something to download it, it should show up at the bottom of your browser, and then if you click this arrow right here, you can go to show in folder, and that's true for most browsers. And I say this because when you're at the school, I don't know where it's going to go to, probably your documents folder or downloads folder. Mine goes to a downloads folder in a different place. So just something to keep in mind, that you need to be able to find your files. All right, so that's Open Clipart. That's one place where you can find a lot of general stuff. Another place, I hate that it does that. There we go. Is Flickr. But now we've got to do something specific with Flickr, because on Flickr, by default, most of the stuff you get is going to be all rights reserved. You can't use this. All rights reserved means it belongs to that person, and it lists it here. You, the copyright holder, reserve all rights by copyright law. So basically, people who post stuff just to have it there on Flickr for themselves, and maybe to like have an online portfolio to easily show people. You can see there's 3 million plus images. But if once you search for something, you go to where it says any license and click all Creative Commons, ta-da, now you get things you can use in our class. And you can see it went from 3 million images to 251,000. So you have to search specifically for this license. If you just do a random search and keep clicking through, you're never going to find this stuff. And so yes, it is a very, very reduced set. So don't fall in love with something before you check the license. And you can see the symbols, once you learn what they mean. I know this means attribution. If you don't know that yet, you can click here and it tells you. Now, when I'm asking you guys later on to find images or cite them, I don't need the rest of this. I just need you to tell me that it's attribution. Tell me that you know what type of Creative Commons license it is. Also, when you are citing things, this person has a real name, but a lot of people don't. They just have like usernames, and they might not title it. So if they have a username, well, that's what you put up there in the citation for artist name. And if there's no name for the image, you just say untitled. Makes it sound all fancy and arty. On Flickr, you click the download button and you can pick a size. We're going to go over resolution sizes later. This one actually never really gets all that big, so something to keep in mind. So Flickr's another place, and I think we have a Flickr link. Yep, here. Another way that you can search for images is Google image search. So Google image search, you kind of start off with a search, but again, these are not copyright free. We have to go to settings, advanced settings. And when you're in here, you can also, by the way, look for like different size pictures. You know, you might have to say I want larger pictures because you're working, let's say, with bitmap. But usage rights. This one's a little more specific. Let's see, free to use or share or modify even commercially. So that's the most open. You don't need the even commercially because you're in class, but share or modify you're going to want, or modify anyways you're going to want. And we do that, and so we have a different set of pictures now. And I'm hovering over them to look at the sites they're from. And you're going to see the same few sites. You're going to see the same few sites. I see Pexels, I see Wikimedia, public domain, and then a few others, Flickr. A few that I'm not familiar with. I'm very curious, so I'm going to click on this one. This does not count. Don't take it from here because Google's search engine is nah. You got to click visit. Oh, I love this. CC0 public domain. We can use this. And I click here to say learn more. Okay, it tells me about the license. I want to find the part that because I've never seen the site before. So I want to see license. I want to see what they say. It's hard to understand complex licenses. That's why all photos here are licensed under this. That means they're free to use. You can do this, all without asking for permission. Attribution is not required. The only restriction is that identifiable people may not appear in a bad light or in a way that they might find offensive unless they. Okay, so if an actual person is in the picture, you should, use good judgment in what you're doing. This is very, very clear. And that's what I'm looking for. So one of the things you'll want to do is because you're going to, you're not always going to find the same sites that I've shown you. And so I've never seen two of these. Oh, free to the public domain. Read more frequently asked questions. They are being pretty clear. So that's good. There's a disclaimer. I'm no fan of that. This site makes no claims, promises, or guarantees to the accuracy or completeness. I'm not a fan of when people say that because it's like they're not doing enough to keep track. So we're not going to use that one. And that's the kind of judgment call you'll need to make as you're working. All right. So Google's is a search engine. It's an aggregator, basically. It can find different things from different places. Stuff like Flickr or Pixabay, OpenClipart.org, those are databases. Those are the databases that Google is aggregating from. So that's something to keep in mind. SoundCloud would be, audio, obviously. YouTube is very interesting. So if I go to YouTube and I go to my videos because I have videos in here. Let me see if I can. There we go. So I want to because I want to see the edit the information. So when it comes to these videos, I can set them up. Edit video. With specific licenses and information. I can say whether they're public or not. But under advanced settings, I can say standard YouTube license, which means mine. The only other option is Creative Commons attribution. So this is a problem because there are other forms of Creative Commons licenses. So what you'll see a lot of people do is they'll say standard YouTube license, and that's what's going to show up when you go to the actual video. So if I go to the actual video, it'll say standard YouTube license. But then underneath, you'll see from a lot of people, it says, actually it's Creative Commons attribution non-commercial or something like that. So that's one of the things you'll have to kind of get used to is looking for those details. The last place I showed, archive.org. This site is great, except you have to be very, very careful. So why do we have to be very careful? Well, archive.org, their goal is to get everything from everywhere and archive it, basically. They archive library materials, they archive all sorts of stuff. But that means every one of these libraries is very, very, very different. So we have the Boston Public Library, seems to be partnered up with them. And if I click on one of these things, I'm looking for information on copyright, and I'm not seeing it. It is dated to 1901, which is pretty old. And they're not really spelling it out. So in the case of printed works that are this old, you might have to do some homework. Here we go. So this is 1999. If something is this new and I don't see copyright information, I assume it's copyrighted and that it's here for the same experience as going to a library to read a copyrighted book. So these aren't things that, you could use them for research, but you couldn't use them in art projects where you reuse them. One place where you could is the Pellinger Archives. So this insane archive, I'm not even going to lie, it's nuts, is all public domain. So any one of these videos I click on, and it says usage, Creative Commons public domain. So they're making it very clear on every single one, because Pellinger used to actually be separate, that these are all public domain. And there's a lot of cool like commercials and old-timey PSAs. Like, look at this, good eating habits. I can't even imagine what they're eating there. A great duck and cover video animation. Now be careful with old videos and old radio shows because they can be very sexist and very racist, like bad. So some of them are harmless. Some of them are just silly, and like duck and cover is about hiding under your desk to save yourself from a nuclear bomb. I'm not kidding. And I'm sure Care of the Skin has got terrible advice for how to take care of yourself. But so some of them are just silly. Some of them are quite offensive. So be very, very careful. The same thing with, there's an old time radio. So there's all these old radio shows, Dragnet, Gunsmoke. I'm pretty sure most of them are under public domain. You'd have to click on them to find out individually, and they're all downloadable if they're under public domain, so you can get them. But of course, I can't even imagine what content there might be in some of these. So tread carefully if you are listening to some of these or looking through some of these. And like I said, you have to always look very specifically at what's going on there. So for our purposes, in this class, what you want to do is usually have your own work. There are places where you are going to use Creative Commons licensed or public domain material, including background sounds for certain things, and we'll talk about that on an individual basis for your various assignments. But if you, for wanting to know exactly how to cite things, we have under in-class exercises our scavenger hunt, and you can see citation requirements. This is for my class and my class only. This is not a school-wide thing. There's both stuff missing and extra stuff in here if you're in another class. So title, artist, and if it's physical, where you found the image. If it's online, a link to the image. We'll go over that in a second. And I want you to list the license it's under. This is unique to me. I want you to tell me that you know how it's licensed. So if you grab something from Flickr and you say it's by Wake Up Freeman, it's called Space Engine. Notice I'm not asking for the date. That's not as relevant to me. I want to know you know who made it, because we're attributing it to them, what it's called, and then you can click on Some Rights Reserved and tell me that it's attribution non-commercial. That's a key thing I want to know, because I want to know that you're thinking about that and paying attention. And if you're writing all rights reserved, that's wrong. Also, I don't want you writing some rights reserved. I want to know it's attribution non-commercial. I want to know that specifically. Also, I ask for a link. Do you see this link? That's nuts. Any of these sites should have a share button. It's a little arrow. In the case of Flickr, it's down here towards the right. And if you click it, see that truncated link? So that's the link you want to include, because the both will go to the right image, but this one is so much smaller that it's easier to deal with. And most of the sites, I know Open Clipart definitely has that. If they don't, that's okay. But use that if you can. All right, and this scavenger hunt page also has a few links to things, so you can know where to look for stuff. You have to check the source for Google. I say I found it on Google doesn't count. Like we want to know the actual source. Google is never a source, ever. All right, but this is how you're going to want to cite stuff for class. So whenever you're using someone else's work, you're going to want to cite that, and you can easily do that. You know, when you submit stuff, this is not something you submit for, but you can add the citation here in the comments section, and then I'll see it. Yes, I want to submit. I will see it listed here, so I'll know that you're citing work that you used, which is great for me. All right, so that's the information on that. And if you guys have any questions, please email me, because this is something we're going to be doing throughout the semester. It's going to be very important.